today. We have the wonderful Amy Berger. Amy, so nice to have you with us.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Pleasure. Real pleasure. We wanted to reach out to you because we've had loads of very technical guests on, and I've no doubt you could talk to all the technical stuff around metabolic health and keto. But actually, a lot of the questions we've had from our audience is that's well and good, but what about the actual practical everyday, making this sustainable and easy and part of my life? Because otherwise, there's such a mental tax to living a ketogenic lifestyle that it detracts from the benefits sometimes. I mean, your whole wonderful YouTube channel is called Keto Without the Crazy, if I'm correct in saying that. What was
Yes.
the inspiration behind the YouTube channel?
Um, the the channel itself came because years ago I was thinking, well, there are so many keto YouTube channels already. Does the world really need another one? But I told myself nobody is saying things the way I want to say them or is saying the specific things I would say. So I'm like, let me just give it a try. I'm going to put some videos out and see what happens. And the name of Keto Without the Crazy came actually a couple of years after I started my channel. And it came because I've been in the low carb and keto world for a long time. I've been eating some variation of a low carb diet for probably almost 20 years. Not always strict keto, but I'm always low carb on some level. And when I was new to this, most of the social media that we have today didn't even exist. Like the very first time I started learning about all this, Facebook, Reddit, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, or X, none of it even existed. And it was so much simpler to get started with a low carb or keto diet because you just read a book. You read one or two books and just followed a plan. There wasn't 800 or 8,000 different voices in your head telling you 72 different things and scaring the hell out of you about food. And there was a lot less information out there, but there was also a lot less misinformation and a lot less confusion. And so my Keto Without the Crazy is really my attempt to return things to that kind of state and help people see how simple it really can be when you let it be, to kind of give them the simplicity that I had when I was new.
Well, I think you've definitely achieved that. Your books, the Alzheimer's Antidote and your Carb Confusion and your YouTube channel, I think are pieces of signal amongst a lot of noise, which is very needed because I think when, as you know, and as our audience knows, that it's not just it can be a diet just to lose weight, which is fine, and that's great, but there's also a lot of really important chronic diseases and lifestyle changes that can affect the course of your life from doing keto properly. So I think it's needed. With that spirit in mind, if someone recognized you in a coffee shop and thought, oh, cool, that's, wanted a keto nutritionist, Amy Berger, I'm going to ask her for a minute of her time. And they said, okay, I've got a minute. I'm overwhelmed with all the keto advice. My macros, my this. What would you say to them is the sort of the 60-second best piece of advice you could give for someone who is finding them getting lost in the weeds of it?
Yeah, I think the primary thing that a ketogenic or very low carb diet does for you is it switches your body from being fueled mostly on carbohydrate to being fueled mostly on fat. And the way to make that happen is to keep your carb intake very low. It doesn't happen because you have specific macros or percentages of your calories from protein and fat and carbs. It doesn't come because your food is organic or because of all these other things that you want, putting butter in your coffee. It comes because your carbohydrate intake is very low. So start there. Cut out all the most obvious sources of sugar and starch. So, potatoes, rice, bread, pasta, and the sweets, ice cream, cookies, or I guess you guys call them biscuits, and like crackers and waffles and breakfast cereal. Eat proteins and non-starchy vegetables. We call them above the ground vegetables. And this is already too deep in the weeds. If I had 60 seconds, I would tell someone it's a metabolic switch that gets your body to run mostly on fat instead of mostly on carbs. And the way to make that happen is to eat little to no sugar and starch.
Okay, wonderful, super clear. And I'm always a big fan in any field, be it this or I don't know, when venturing into a new field, I love asking experts, what is the most obvious, repeatable mistake you see people make time and time and time again? And sort of knowing that up front, you sort of can avoid it.
Yeah, there's a lot, but probably the number one issue is just actually eating too much carbohydrate. If keto works through a couple of different mechanisms, but the first and most fundamental thing you need to do is have that metabolic switch happen and help your body run mostly on fat. And it only everybody has a different carbohydrate threshold, meaning how much carbohydrate they can eat and still be in that fat fueled state. So I can't give an exact number for everybody, but that is probably the biggest mistake that makes keto not work is you're just simply eating too much carbohydrate to get that metabolic switch that you really need and want.
Mm. Yeah, I think there's a lot of misconceptions. I think when people start doing a ketogenic diet, they suddenly realize how many hidden sugars are in things. And I can't have. I remember always when my mum, when she was doing it with her cancer journey, the realization of I can't have any blueberries, or if I can in very small quantities, right?
Right. And I would say, I don't know how things are where you are, but in the US now, there's this exploding market of keto packaged items, keto ice cream, keto cereal, keto cookies. And some people can include those things and still do well, still get the results they want. A lot of us can't. And it's kind of the same issue as this is just too much carbohydrate because the marketing is very misleading. Just because a package says keto on it doesn't mean you can have it on a ketogenic diet and have it work the way you want. So that's kind
Yeah.
of people are just eating a lot more carbohydrate, but it's not always because they're eating bread and pasta. They know that they shouldn't have that. It's all this other newfangled stuff that I think people just have no idea that like it says keto, that doesn't mean it's actually keto.
It's really interesting that as well. It's sort of I've tested a load of quote unquote keto products, be it bars or drinks, whatever, and the amount that actually spike my glucose really high. I mean, most of them do, and actually, I'm quite impressed when I find one that doesn't. But they're in the minority, sadly. But hopefully, over the next couple of years, we'll see some innovation there. Um, when it comes to uh, when it comes to starting people off on a ketogenic diet, there's lots of different ways and lots of different types of a ketogenic diet. Some people argue that carnivore is a type of ketogenic diet. Some people would argue that it's not because the sheer amount of protein invokes a gluconeogenesis response and the ketones aren't as high. What do you think about when it comes to keto? Would you include carnivore in that, or just how do you think about that as a broader question?
Yeah, to me, carnivore is a very, very low carb diet or almost a zero carb diet, depending on what you eat. For a lot of people, it will not actually be a ketogenic diet. So if we define a ketogenic diet as you are generating ketones, for a lot of people, a carnivore diet is not ketogenic. Like you said, the protein will prevent, I mean, not prevent, it reduces the production of ketones. So some people will produce ketones on a carnivore diet, some won't. But in my opinion, carnivore that's not the goal of a carnivore diet. A carnivore diet, I think, is really the strictest form of an elimination diet. So if you have very mysterious, unexplained allergies or autoimmune issues, very severe GI problems, carnivore is great for that, I think. But if you need therapeutic ketosis, if you need the ketones in your body to do something for your nervous system or your brain, you might not get that on a carnivore diet. It doesn't mean carnivore is bad. They just have different applications, I think.
Yes, yes. Okay, so something like metabolic psychiatry, or I don't know, like a hardcore cancer, where you're trying to measure your glucose ketone index and you need your ketones to be high, a traditional, more dairy-based ketogenic diet would be preferable. But for something like autoimmune disease, maybe carnivore would work just as well.
Yeah, the keto could be preferable, but you could do a carnivore diet and have it be more ketogenic if you eat higher fat and slightly lower protein. You can still get that ketogenic effect, but you do have to be, it's not unlimited protein. You might not be able to eat a 16-ounce ribeye steak. Well, that's a fatty cut. You have to be a little bit more careful with the fat and protein if you are actually aiming for ketones. But I do think most people will probably have an easier time producing more ketones on a more traditional ketogenic diet that includes, non-starchy vegetables and some other fats.
Mm. It's a really interesting point. That is one of my learnings of experimenting with this is the difference between mixing a protein on its own versus protein with like a 2-to-1 ratio of fat, and the difference in my glucose response. Would you say that is a pretty universal response?
I, yes, but there's always exceptions. There's always outliers and people who don't respond the way we think they should. But biochemically and physiologically, yeah, if you have a slightly lower protein intake and a higher fat intake, I think the majority of people will be, more ketogenic. They'll have higher ketones.
Okay, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. So, an issue I've had uh, posed to me, and I didn't have an answer for this, is what is healthy is quite subjective. And it seems like, you and I are reading off the same hymn sheet when it comes to ketogenic diets and all the profound benefits. But a lot of people in the ketogenic and low carb communities, processed food doesn't seem to be a term that gets thrown about a lot. And you can have a ketogenic diet where you're eating a lot of bacon, you're eating a lot of cheese, a lot of sort of processed items. How do processed foods matter within a ketogenic context at all?
In my opinion, no. And what really matters is whether the foods you are eating are conducive to you getting the results you want. If you eat bacon or salami or prosciutto or pepperoni and you are achieving what you want to achieve, if your blood sugar is well controlled, your blood pressure, if your brain fog is gone, if your joint pain is gone, if all the things you want to have happen are happening, then clearly those foods are not getting in the way, right? And I think so. I don't know if you know the name Siobhan Huggins. She's somewhat well known in the keto world, and she said something at a conference a few years ago that was fabulous. And she said, I don't care how processed a food is. I care about the metabolic effects. And I could not agree more. If somebody, for their own personal preferences, prefers to avoid those types of products, that's fine. You don't have to eat them on a keto diet, but they make keto and carnivore for some people easier and more realistic to actually stick to. If you can only eat grass-finished meats and pastured poultry and the organic this and artisanal that, that is going to put up a barrier to a lot of people even trying this, and if they can have some of those more convenience types of foods, processed foods, I don't care as long as the diet is working well for them. And I will say, though, there are people who might have adverse reactions in some way to some of the preservatives, whether it's the nitrates or, maltodextrin or who knows what. Some people might be sensitive to those, but we have decades upon decades of clinical trials and thousands upon thousands of people eating this way who include those processed foods, and they're doing great. So again, if somebody prefers to avoid those, that's totally fine. But I think that most people can include them and still do really well.
Mm. I like that because it seems like it's very outcome based as opposed to having these sort of strict rules. It's like, well, as you said, does it help you achieve what you're trying to achieve, right? Or is it
Yeah.
distracting from that?
I think that's what matters. This isn't, to me anyway, this is not a religion. There's not a set of commandments carved in stone, passed down from on high. It's how do we do this in a way that works for that individual person? Yeah. Why shouldn't it be outcome based, right? Why should we base it on anything else? Somebody else's food purity rule?
Yeah. So I imagine when people come and work with you, they might have a clear goal in mind, but I imagine often they don't. So it must be quite hard to realize or figure out what it is you're trying to achieve. So is a large part of your work trying to sort of get to, okay, what is the outcome we're looking for? Or if I missed the point.
I would say the majority of people who come to me are looking for weight loss. And most people who contact me have already been doing a ketogenic or low carb diet and they're stuck. They either lost a lot of weight and now they've been stalled for a while, or they never really lost weight in the first place. And so the majority come to me for weight loss, but I always ask them, what else can we look at to assess how this is working for you? Let's say, because the weight loss, I think it will come if they do what I tell them to do, but it might be slow or it might take a little while. So what else can we point to? If you do have joint pain, if you have migraines, if you know, heartburn, so many other things, mood, so many things get better on keto that I never want weight loss to be the only thing someone is focused on, because it so often is. So I really try to help people find other things that we can look at to say, oh, keto is actually working really well for me. Like, I feel great. It's just that my weight is a little bit stubborn.
Hmm. It's funny, I think a misconception with keto is, oh, well, I'm burning my own fat, so I've just got to do it and I'll lose weight just like that, and it'll be effortless. I know you wrote a book on this called The Stall Slayer. Tell us about that whole piece.
Yeah, I wish that keto was this magical fat loss diet where you would stop eating carbs and fat would just melt off of you. I wish. For some people, it is that straightforward, but a lot of us run into problems. And like we said earlier, sometimes it's just too much carbohydrate. So you're not actually really burning fat to begin with. Sometimes the second issue that I see people run into, and it's probably tied for number one spot with too much carbs, is overdoing fat. On keto, so many people are told, put oil in your coffee. You have to hit your fat macro. Everything should be really fatty. And again, that works for some people. For other people, it's a disaster and they don't, it's just too much fat. And there are, particularly with women in middle age and beyond, they have yo-yo dieted for so long that their metabolic rate is actually very depressed. And we might have to do something to help get them to a more normal metabolic rate in order for their body to let go of fat. So I have a whole chapter on thyroid in the Stall Slayer book, because I see this all the time. It happens to men too, but it's a lot more common in women, where the reason they can't lose
So
weight is because they're almost like in a hibernation mode. Their body just isn't
yeah,
using that much energy.
and you mentioned the yo-yo diet. So if is that because they've been in such a deficit for so long, their body, as you said, has gone into this sort of like hunker down and starvation mode, and we don't want to burn anything. We have to sort of protect ourselves.
I
So
do,
how
yes.
would
I think that's why, and it's pretty controversial, but I can't deny that that's what I see a lot. And some
yeah
of it is, it's the yo-yoing, but the worst of it is, and we're seeing these with these new GLP-1 agonist medications, when you lose weight, you don't just lose fat, you tend to lose muscle mass, depending on what you eat and how you go about the weight loss. But when the weight comes back on, almost all of what comes back on is fat. So now your metabolic rate is actually even lower because you've lost the muscle mass. So it's
Mm.
this double whammy, but it's I just see that a lot, that people have inadvertently gotten themselves into this position.
Yeah. This is what I've been doing. I guess I've done more. I'm 29 now, but I've done more keto in my 20s than I probably have not. And I think for guys, or at least I've experienced, is often they're under eating, and the downstream effects of under eating for a long period of time, you're not going to feel great. And they misattribute the under eating to, oh, I just don't feel very good on keto. So it's almost the other caveat of, if you're not doing keto for weight loss and you're doing it for, I don't know, anti-inflammatory or whatever, the whole myriad of things that it could be doing it for, actually getting enough fat, is vital, right? But as you were talking about earlier, if it's weight loss, if you're in a chronic calorie surplus, weight's not going to come off no matter what you're doing, even if you're in keto, if I hear you correctly.
Yeah. Being in ketosis does not guarantee that you will lose fat at all. But I mean, it's possible to gain weight on a keto diet. If you are underweight, maybe you actually need to gain healthy mass, and you can do that on keto. But I think you brought up such a great point that people undereat sometimes, on not just men, it does, women do it too, because part of it is that keto, at least for some people, suppresses the appetite or controls your appetite so well that you're just not as hungry. Maybe you used to eat 3 meals and a bunch of snacks every day, and now you're eating 2 meals a day or even 1 meal a day. And for a lot of people, that's just not enough. They're not going to get enough energy to power their body. And the other side of this is that I think fasting has been a little bit too glorified in the keto world. It's almost this point of pride, how many hours you can go without eating, how long you can go without eating, how many, and that's great if it's working for somebody, but if they're tired and they're depressed and they have no sex drive and they don't want to go to the gym anywhere, everything just, you need to eat. Your body needs fuel. Your body needs energy. And I think there's a time and a place for fasting, but I really just think fasting has become overly glorified, and it's not always the best thing for everybody.
I'm in such agreement. Let's double click on that, because I think, I don't know where it came from, but often maybe like 2017, 18, 19, kind of in the same way that, everyone's talking about, uh, like the health fads come around, right? And there's like the problem is that they're seeded from a good idea. So like, yes, fasting is awesome and great, but I mean, actually, my contrarian view is I think a lot of the calorie restriction and fasting studies, um, you could make a really good argument that the benefits coming off the study is actually the result of higher ketones in the blood as opposed to calorie restriction. Do you have any thoughts on that, actually?
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, keto, in a lot of textbooks, or even just a lot of the stuff you see these days, keto is called a fasting mimicking diet, precisely because you experience a lot of the same effects as fasting, except you're eating food. What happens when you fast? Insulin comes way down, which is what helps your body switch over to running on fat. You generate ketones, and you can do this on a ketogenic diet without fasting. And there may be, I think that the concept of autophagy is very misunderstood. Autophagy, for anyone who's been living under a rock and has never heard that, is sort of the self-eating, is what it translates to, where your body kind of cannibalizes and breaks down old, worn out cellular components, right? To either just get rid of or to repurpose, to make new. And supposedly fasting really upregulates this. And that's fine, but that autophagy happens all the time anyway. Maybe it happens more when you fast, but if autophagy wasn't going on all the time, you would never heal from a paper cut. You would never heal from a skinned knee. We see this in action all the time. So, and you are correct in that, as far as I'm aware, almost all the research done on fasting has been done in people or animals eating a high carb diet, eating a mixed sort of standard Western diet. What we don't know yet is how much of an additional benefit, if any, fasting provides beyond just doing what they call a well-formulated ketogenic diet. Not some wacko, crazy keto diet, but like a real, true medical type therapeutic ketogenic diet. Does fasting do anything even beyond the effects you get from the ketogenic diet? We don't know, because nobody has studied that yet, as far as I know.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the emerging literature of the sort of, rather than like broad span like keto, actually going to the nuances a bit, as you said, like what happens when you got fasting keto or keto versus carnivore, and just sort of zooming in a bit there, which is there's a few studies going on at the moment, to my mind. I'd love to get into the hormonal side of things. Are there any hormonal misconceptions around keto? I know thyroid is particularly important for females. How do your hormones get affected when one undertakes a ketogenic diet?
For the most part, I think they get affected favorably, because what tends to happen is things that are really elevated, problematically elevated, come down. Things that are too low come up. And just as a couple of examples, the condition PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, happens in women, and it comes from chronically high insulin, because the chronically high insulin in women actually raises testosterone. In men, it does the opposite. In women, so your testosterone will be higher, and some of the hormones that affect a menstrual cycle get altered. And this is why with PCOS, you might have infertility, you get oily skin, you get acne, you get body hair growth, and keto diets are a slam dunk for fixing PCOS. It helps to normalize all of those hormones that were out of balance. And some men, not all, some men report that testosterone increases when they go on keto, because if they have too much insulin, they actually produce less testosterone. So it just sort of helps to correct some of these issues. And thyroid is such a contentious issue with keto. Like, oh, don't do keto, it's bad for your thyroid. I think what I see in women who run into problems with low thyroid after having gone on a keto or low carb diet, it's not so much the diet per se as, like we said before, they are under eating. They are unknowingly starving themselves. They're just not eating enough, particularly if they're really active, if they work out a lot, and they're just not giving their body enough fuel. Well, of course, your metabolic rate is going to slow down to protect you. And this happens on any diet that is too restrictive. This is not unique to keto. It can happen on low fat. It can happen on paleo, vegetarian, whatever. It's not because of keto. It's because you're not eating enough. So
That's
it's,
such a thing.
yeah.
I think for guys as well, and I think this is the need for your kind of content, because if you go into keto blind and you have a rough idea, it's quite easy to just put a foot wrong and then compound it over a month. You feel terrible, and I know for a lot of guys, if you're exercising all the time and you're in keto and you've got no like idea of like the rough calories you're intaking, and you're in a deficit for too long, I know that a lot of people have attributed a rise in SHGB, like really high rise in sex hormone binding globulin, and then as a result having quite low free testosterone. When in fact, if they just bump the calories up, that would probably go away. It's not the keto itself. If that's correct, if I said anything incorrect there to your knowledge?
No, I agree. I think that is a large part of the issue. But I will say, I some people feel better with a little bit more carbohydrate in their diet. Not 300 grams a day, but especially if you're athletic, can you thrive on a keto diet? Yes. But we have demonized carbohydrate way too much. And if somebody has a little bit more energy and a little more strength in the gym or just feels better emotionally, cognitively, whatever, with a little bit of starch in their diet, that's fine. It's to again, the keto, there's so much hyperbole in the keto community, right? Oh, plants are killing you. This is poisonous. Everything. Okay, but there's a couple of billion people around the world who eat potatoes or who eat rice, who eat vegetables, who are healthy and lean and active and who age gracefully with all their faculties intact. I'm never going to get on board with saying that all of that stuff is just poisonous on its face. So if somebody wants to have a potato with dinner, have a little influx of starch now and then, that's fine. But I agree with you that if a large part of the problem with people feeling sluggish like that on keto is they probably just need more food overall. But I do think that some people will feel better with actually getting a little bit more of that from carbohydrate. I know that's like heresy here, but I think that's an issue. And then, of course, so many people, especially if they're really new to this, have no idea of the importance of salt or sodium. No idea. And the headaches, the dizziness, the fatigue, the just low energy, 90% of the time, you need just a lot more sodium.
It's a really, again, I agree with everything you're saying. It actually really resonates. Um, Especially if you drink loads of coffee as well. I find I don't know if that's actually true anymore. It might just be some sort of old myth I've got, but I often find that uh, a lot of caffeine can rid you of your electrolytes. Is that even true?
Maybe just because coffee is a diuretic beverage, so if it causes you to like urinate more or lose water, you'll lose some sodium and electrolytes with that. Yeah.
Okay, right. So yeah, so that coupled with the natural being in ketosis does rid you of some sodium. Is that right?
Oh, yes, yes. Absolutely.
Yes. Okay. Right. So yeah, the pair probably aren't the best. It's a really good point around the carbohydrates and how I like your approach because your whole thing is ketogenic diets and helping people with that and all the different wonderful things that come off the back of that. But as you said, you know, if it's not right for everyone and it's not right for everyone, absolute to rare birds kind of idea. This whole approach, I find that most people are not metabolically healthy and as a result are not metabolically flexible. But once you are metabolically flexible and your body knows what to do with its own fat stores and knows what to do with an incoming carbohydrate, then I guess it's more balance. And yes, absolutely. But I think the message from the low carb and keto community is try to get you to that point of metabolic flexibility and then your body's working optimally again, I think. Um,
I would like to think so. I it's not my place to say what anyone else, quote unquote, should want to do. But I think ideally we get to a point where we don't need a ketogenic diet to feel our best, or we don't need a carnivore diet where we can have some starch now and then, some sugar now and then, and we feel fine. It doesn't induce all of these issues that maybe it used to induce. But if somebody wants to stay keto for their whole life or carnivore, that's fine too. But these diets were initially considered almost like a corrective diet. Like you said, most people are not metabolically healthy. If we can get you to a point where we restore your metabolic health, well, do we? I compare it to having a broken leg. If you break your leg, you have to wear a cast. But once your leg heals, you take the cast off. You don't wear the cast for the rest of your life. It is a corrective measure. And that's kind of how I see keto and carnivore. But so you may not have to follow it for the rest of your life, but if people want to, if they just feel absolutely best doing that, then I think that's fine. They don't have to go back to adding more carbohydrate or adding plant foods. But I think it's nice if you can get your body to a point where you can tolerate that stuff just fine.
Wonderful. The role of vegetables within the ketogenic diet. That to some people will sound like a really obvious why are you even asking a question, and to others it would seem like a loaded question that they're all out to kill us and everything, and then everything in between. What do you think?
I did a video not long ago on my YouTube channel called In Defense of Vegetables. And it got some very nice feedback, which I'm glad about. I was very nervous to put it out there because, like you said, I thought the carnivores are going to come for me. And do humans need vegetables? No. Can we survive and thrive without them? Yes. But again, do some people actually feel better with them? Yeah. Not everybody has these off the charts negative reactions to plant foods. And I made the case in that video that for some people, it's not just that they can tolerate plants, they actually feel better with them. And one of the big areas, or two, if they're two separate things, is people that consider themselves to be volume eaters. If you like to eat a lot and you like to feel very full, you can do that on porterhouse steak and you can do that on, chicken wings. But some people, myself included, find that I can eat a much, much larger volume of non-starchy vegetables and get that full feeling, get that stretch feeling without having eaten 6,000 calories for the day, and there's also something about vegetables for some people that just sort of round out the meal. We can eat a ribeye steak. We can eat a piece of fish with some butter melted on it. And even if we feel full, maybe we still feel that something's missing. And it really only takes a little bit of plant material to give you that sense of like, okay, my meal is complete. I'm satisfied. Yeah, you can be full without being satisfied. And if people can eat vegetables and not experience a lot of adverse issues, then vegetables are really helpful for those people. So I just, again, to demonize all vegetables and make them sound like one spinach leaf is going to kill you, it's going to give you kidney stones, it's going to give you oxalate poisoning, I am not on board for that. And I honestly think, and I hope, frankly, that people are getting tired of that kind of extremism, because I get clients coming to me who are literally terrified of food. They don't know what to eat anymore. They're scared of everything because some expert out there on the internet is making them scared of everything. And it's, I always say the whole point of keto or carnivore is to make your life better. It's to help you feel better, whether physically, mentally, emotionally. If it's doing the opposite, if you are living in constant panic and fear and worry, what is the point of that? Go have a donut. I mean, you know what I mean? Like,
I do.
It is. I just see this all the time, and I feel like, unfortunately, the social media algorithms they reward that hyperbole and that panic-inducing stuff, and that's why we are where we are now.
They do, and you can easily get suckered into a echo chamber where all you see is the same thing, and be it politically or ideologically with food. And I do, and I use that word intentionally, ideologically with food. I speak to brilliant people like yourself on this podcast, which is a real privilege. Not my full-time job, but a real fun thing to do that me and my partner do. And I try to not have any like grand ideology with it, but inevitably you speak to people you find interesting and it gets hard. But it just seems to, if you have one ideology, it sort of gums up your mind where you can't accept or try to see why another ideology is right. And actually, most of the time, well, it depends. As you said, some
Yeah.
people thrive on higher carbs. Some people, keto and carnivore are amazing. I mean, I had Dr. Anthony Chafee on the other day, and I'd never heard the argument for vegetables all trying to kill us and plants. And I don't know if he's right or not. I haven't done the work to have an opinion, but I'll try it for myself, so I feel. And then, I'm with you though. I do love a really big, healthy salad. It feels good, right? Whether that's placebo or actually there's lovely things in it.
Yeah.
Then you can't argue against the other side of the literature, which seems to be ignored, of like polyphenols are a really great thing for the brain and body, right? And lots of wonderful sulforaphane, which you get from plants and things like this. So there's always another side of the coin, right? It takes a
Yeah. And
nuance.
I don't want anyone out there to get the wrong idea. Like, I've made my career out of helping people with ketogenic diets and even carnivore. I work for a company with Dr. Eric Westman where we do online courses about keto. And we just did a course about carnivore. It was very well received. I think people learned a lot. And I'm very proud of that course because I have recommended the carnivore diet for clients when I thought it was the best thing for them. But I've had clients for whom I recommended increasing carbs. It's like you said, it depends. What is going to be best for any one person depends on what they're trying to accomplish. Because I know I've been like, oh, well, not everyone needs keto, or some people can have vegetables. I don't want anyone to like, I absolutely support keto and carnivore diets, but I refuse to be in this extremist camp that insists that everybody must eat this way or this is the optimal way to eat for all humans. I just don't think it is.
I like that. Is music to my ears. I admire that, and actually admire it because you do it. This is your full-time thing as well. So you have more commitment, consistency, more sort of more bias that you've got to sort of fight off, which is hard. We're all human. Okay, so what would be a good scenario or a good profile for someone who would come to you and you would recommend the carnivore diet? And what would be a good profile to come for you and you'd recommend them a more traditional ketogenic diet?
Carnivore, it's easier to say who I would recommend that for. It's typically someone who is already doing a low carb or keto diet, and they've probably experienced some benefits. Maybe they've lost some weight. Some of their health issues have improved, but they're not gone. And then there are some things that are still a bigger problem. It could be, skin eczema, psoriasis, something with your skin. It could be joint pain. It could be mood, things like depression, anxiety. And I mean, autoimmune issues are huge. Multiple sclerosis or and anything GI. If somebody's been on keto, but they still have a lot of just gastrointestinal problems, I think carnivore is definitely worth trying. And I always tell you might not have to do it forever, but I think you should absolutely give this a month or two. Try it. Because if it's amazing, well, oh my God, great. If not, if it doesn't do anything for you, well, go back to what you were doing before. But for adding carbs, and that was your other question, right? Who would I tell to eat a bit more carbs?
Let's go with that. And then also, what would be the more classic case? What would be a case for more classical ketogenic diets as opposed to carnivore?
Okay. Well, so the classical keto probably, I would say more for mental health. I know I think I said mood stuff for carnivore, which could work, but the people with anything neurological or neurodegenerative, Parkinson's disease, Alzheimer's, traumatic brain injury, I think those probably need the ketones. So I think again, everybody's a little bit different, but I think those cases are probably the strongest rationale for an actual ketogenic diet, where you're paying more attention to the ketones rather than just controlling your blood sugar, like, for diabetes or something.
Mm.
That's, I think those people probably benefit most from strict keto. And then,
Okay.
yeah.
So, and then I want to get into Alzheimer's because I know you wrote a wonderful book. But before we do that, what would be a candidate for, like, who needs to add carbs?
The carbs are, because of how popular keto and carnivore and low carb diets have gotten, there's a lot of people eating this way who don't really need it. They never had any massive health problems. They never were overweight. And they're just doing it because they think they think they're supposed to, right? They think that this is the best way to eat. And I so these people never really had a pressing reason to go on a keto or carnivore diet. Maybe they just wanted to try it. And maybe it very often they feel better at first. Maybe they do lose a little weight, even if they didn't have a lot to lose. Maybe they do feel a little more energy, but over time, that kind of starts to reverse and they start to feel worse. They're more tired. They're more edgy, the mood. There's just so many, they just start to not feel so good anymore. And those are the people, I think, who just need a little bit more carb. And again, not a ton. I'm not talking 200 or 300 grams a day. Maybe a little bit of fruit, half a potato, half a sweet potato, a little bit of black beans. Like I would still recommend sort of real food, if you will, like whole food kind of carbs. And especially if these people are athletic, if they work out a lot, I find that they can, again, you can be highly athletic on a keto or carnivore diet. Some people do better with a little bit of starch. So, but that's the major thing that I would recommend increasing carbs is people who probably didn't need such a strict low carb diet ever to begin with.
Mm. No, again, really well put, and I love how flexible the approach is. Right, it does depend. When it comes to seeing what the people who are so immersed in the literature like yourself and live and breathe this stuff all day long, I'm really fascinated to see what works for them, right? So what do you do? What's your take on this on a daily basis?
I I my diet is very flexible, I would have to call it. I am always low carb to some extent. Sometimes I'm in ketosis, sometimes I'm not. Sometimes I have days, multiple days in a row where I don't eat vegetables. I don't consider that to be a carnivore diet. I just didn't go to the store maybe that week. There's no vegetables in the house, so I'm just not eating them. But yeah, so I guess I would say that I'm always on a very low carb diet. Sometimes it's ketogenic, sometimes not. But I don't measure anything. I don't weigh my food. I don't calculate macros. I just sort of follow that overarching principle of keep my carbs low. And every now and then, confession time, everybody, every now and then I'm going to have name your insane carb food. Once in a while, I'm going to have, I don't know what, a cookie, a piece of cake, a piece of really good, like, do you know who Bill Schindler is?
No, I
Bill
don't.
Schindler is, you have to look him up. He is a PhD researcher who is also like a survival skills expert. He's spoken at a number of the conferences. If you look up Eat Like a Human, he has a book called Eat Like a Human, and his enterprise is called Modern Stone Age, the Modern Stone Age Kitchen. He and his family have created this absolutely fabulous, I don't even know what to call it, food enterprise in Maryland in the US. And I just visited there a few weeks ago, and they are famous for their very traditional long fermented sourdough bread. And if you think I was not going to try that bread, think again. Call the keto police. So yeah,
Yeah.
every now and then I have, but because I don't seem to have an adverse reaction to it. It doesn't cause me to have a schizophrenic episode. It doesn't give me a migraine. And as soon as that meal or that piece is over, I go right back to my diet. I've been eating this way long enough that having the occasional higher carb thing is really no risk that I'm going to spiral for 6 weeks and, gain 20 pounds. I just get right back to my normal way of eating.
Yeah, love that. And I'm with you. I all last week I was doing full carnivore, like literally just beef, ghee, and water. Um, and I got to Saturday, I was on the phone in a local town. We've got these big birds near where I live called red kites, and they're big birds of prey. And I was on the phone just having a chat with my mate, and I take out of my bag a steak, a cold steak I prepared so I can be on track with my diet. And I'm not even joking. I took it out and I was about to eat it, and one of these birds just swooped down and took it from my hand. So then I was just like, screw this, I'm going to get a pastry. And I nailed a pastry, and it was delicious. And, like you, I don't have any adverse effect apart from my willpower, but that's all good. I'm human.
Yeah.
You wrote a wonderful book called The Alzheimer's Antidote. What was the catalyst behind writing the book? And maybe if you could give a sort of a little bit of like a synopsis of the findings and maybe a little teaser of the book.
Sure, sure. The overarching thing is it actually came out of my graduate thesis when I was doing my graduate studies in nutrition. I I forget how it, oh, actually, it was inspired by Gary Taubes. I'm sure you know that name. In one of his books, he had it was Good Calories, Bad Calories, I think that book. He had a chapter that was called Dementia, Cancer, and Aging, or something like that. And it was the first place I had ever heard about a potential connection between Alzheimer's disease and carbohydrate and glucose and insulin problems. And so years later, when I was in graduate school and I needed to pick a thesis topic, I said, "Oh, let me look into that. I wonder if there's enough research on this for me to make something out of." And sure enough, it was all over the medical literature. It was everywhere. They actually now they call Alzheimer's disease type 3 diabetes or diabetes of the brain. And I was so fascinated by this all, but also kind of horrified that it's all over the published journal articles. How come the general public doesn't know anything about this? How had I never even heard of that? And so I didn't want this information to languish on my professor's desk or sit in my laptop and never go anywhere. So I published a book about it. And the gist of it is that the main problem in the brain of somebody with Alzheimer's is that the brain is no longer taking up and metabolizing glucose properly. So it's basically starving for fuel. It's an energy shortage in the brain. So no wonder you have cognitive impairment. No wonder you become forgetful. No wonder your personality change. Your brain is starving to death, basically. And so the rationale for, and why this happens, we don't know. Definitely type 2 diabetes and insulin resistance massively increase risk. They are huge risk factors for developing dementia in older age. But so the rationale for using a ketogenic diet is that even though the brain is not metabolizing glucose the right way, it does still take up and use ketones. And this has been shown over and over again in the research. And so if the problem is that the brain is not getting enough fuel and it can't get enough fuel from glucose, well, we need to give it a different fuel. Oh, great. Good thing the brain sucks up ketones like a champ. So that's the 30,000-foot view of it.
Love it. Love it. I mean, we could do a whole other podcast just on that topic alone.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll leave it, but we will put a link to the book in the bio of the show notes. And I do encourage people to check it out because it is a fascinating topic. I've got about to go off a tangent on that topic, but I'll stop myself. I must ask, while I have you, is what is your general 2 cents on the GLP-1 agonists?
Ooh. I did a video about this for my channel as well a while back. I think that, well, first, I think they are being overused. I don't think they should be used for vanity purposes. For someone who wants to lose 20 pounds, that is not what these drugs should be used for. It's not for me to judge, but that's my opinion. I think, there's a lot of people in the keto and carnivore world who are very opposed to these drugs because they think, well, why don't you just do keto? Why don't you just do carnivore? Well, guess what? If they could just do it, they already would be. There's a lot of people who know about keto and they just have a really hard time doing it or sticking with it. And for some of those people, these drugs can help them do that. It kind of gives them a little bit of assistance to make the changes, the diet and lifestyle changes that they weren't able to make on their own. And so in that case, I think these drugs can be really, really helpful, but I absolutely think they should not be used as like, I'm going to take this drug and that's all I need to do. You still need to change the way you eat, change other things about your life. And you better really, really understand the risk profile, the potential loss of muscle mass, the gastrointestinal problems that you can have. A lot of those things can be avoided if you are working with a professional who knows how to sort of keep you safe and have the right, I don't know what the word is, like just the right instructions so that you do it in a way where you're getting the most benefit and minimizing as much as possible the potential negative effects. So I don't think so. It's not like keto or a GLP-1. You can do both. You can. But I do think the drugs are definitely overused.
Me too. I heard about this yesterday of people microdosing it pre-holiday, and then I heard about people taking it and then taking a boatload of anabolic steroids to stop the muscle loss. It's just like, what? Who told you to do that? Anyway, interesting tangents. I could speak to you for another while. You're a super interesting person, although I'm sure you have better things to do than waste your time with me. So I will just end it with some quick fire questions if that's all good.
Sure, yeah.
Love it. Okay, so for someone who's familiar with ketosis but actually wants to just try and boost their average level of ketones across the day, any quick tips just to push the ketones a little bit higher?
Yeah, it depends on what they're doing now. You might, if you're eating a lot of protein, I would decrease the protein. You could try some MCT oil or coconut oil. That'll give you some ketones. Other than that, I mean, those are the main things I would do.
Okay,
And of
wonderful.
course,
That's good.
make sure that your carb intake is very, very low. Make sure you're not eating those keto ice creams and keto breads that are, you know, preventing the ketosis.
Love it. You seem very well read on this in this whole field, and also you've written, 3 books: The Alzheimer's Antidote, End Your Carb Confusion, and The Stall Slayer. So, um, beyond your books as well, which we will have in the show notes, do you have any book recommendations for people who have heard this conversation today and think, okay, I want to dive a bit deeper? Where can I go?
Yeah, I mean, probably one of my favorite books about this way of eating is an older book, but it is still every bit as relevant today as it was when it came out. And it's called The Art and Science of Low Carbohydrate Living by Stephen Finney and Jeff Volek, two of the world's most prominent researchers. The Art and Science of Low Carbohydrate Living.
They're sort of legends, aren't they, in the field?
Yeah, yeah. Because
Okay,
that book,
wonderful.
I think, gives you the science, but it's very readable. I think it's written in plain English for the most part, but it's also technical enough, I think, for like medical professionals to benefit from it. So it really kind of ticks all the
Hmm.
boxes.
That's a real skill to be able to do.
Yeah.
Um, okay, we'll add that in the show notes as well for sure. And last question for me, Amy, is what important truth do you believe that very few people agree with you on?
About the keto diet?
About anything you like.
Oh. Um I it's such an open-ended question, so I'll stick to food just because it gives me some guardrails to stay within. I would say maybe a lot of what we talked about today, that not everybody needs an ultra low carb diet. And we know they don't, because every single one of us knows people who eat starch, who even eat a little bit of sugar. They look great, they feel great, they have no health problems. So while keto and carnivore can be an incredible therapeutic tool, not everybody needs to eat this way or these ways.
Well said. And actually, just add to that, if you go to people who are at the very leading edge of this and watch what they do, it's more often than not so restricted. It's not the perfect 100% pure keto or pure carnivore. There's some nuance and flexibility in there. Amy, thank you so much for coming on. I really, really enjoyed speaking with you. I learned an absolute bunch, and yeah, just really appreciate you taking the time. Where can we find you and keep up with your wonderful work?
The best place probably is YouTube. People can just look me up on YouTube and find the channel. I'm on Substack now, so people can look for Keto Without the Crazy on Substack. I haven't written anything new in a while, but that will change soon. And I will give you the website just in case anyone wants to contact me. It is very rudimentary. Everybody, please know I am in the process of building a new website because I am in desperate need of it. But for the time being, you can go to stallslayer.com. Like you said, fat loss stalls, stallslayer.com. And there's a contact button. There's a form to work with me. So
Beautiful. We'll put all
let me
those
let me also
links.
just the courses I mentioned that we do online courses. That is adaptyourlifeacademy.com. We have, again, courses about keto, about carnivore, about cancer, and protein, and all kinds of just courses related to all this sort of stuff.
Wonderful.
Adaptyourlifeacademy.com.
Was that you mentioned? Were they some same courses with Dr. Eric Westman?
Yeah.
Okay, cool, wonderful. Well, any and all links will be in the show notes. If you made it this far, thank you so much. And Amy, thanks once again. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Great talking with you.